We have 55,000 thoughts a day. 80% of those thoughts are negative in nature, but 98% of our daily thoughts are the same thoughts we had yesterday. So if you keep having these crappy thoughts, the brain's always going to go into that crappy state. So how do you change that? Well,
meet Kurtis Lee Thomas, certified life coach,
founder of Breathwork Detox,
and a top corporate mindfulness trainer who's worked with Nike and NASA.
I had health complications with some stomach issues that doctors couldn't even diagnose me, never mind fix me. So I became very desperate, seeking out solutions to get back to me. It wasn't until I discovered this ancient breathing technique. I couldn't wrap my brain around how this stupid little breathing technique just solved the problem and healed something that the best doctors from LA to New York couldn't even fix. First exercise I always tell people to do.
You just rocked my world. Welcome to another episode of Unlock Your Potential. Jeff Lerner, your host, always so thrilled to be back with you, having amazing conversations with amazing humans. Today, we are joined by Kurtis Lee Thomas, who is a renowned keynote speaker, one of the world's leading corporate mindfulness trainers. He's basically spoken at kind of all the biggest expositions and platforms to talk about such things alongside guys like Deepak Chopra and Tony Robbins. Works with Ivy League universities, Fortune 500 companies, basically helping awaken the best in people and sort of focusing on that mindfulness aspect. Also, turns out Kurtis is basically my neighbor. We live about 15 minutes apart. So we're going to try not to turn this into like a local gossip fest and actually have a productive dialogue for the audience. But forgive us if we slip into like some local stuff too. Kurtis, so stoked to have you on the show, man. Welcome.
I love that, and I love the caveat there. Thanks for having me.
Well, we got to have a little carve out for ourselves, you know. We were just reminiscing that the way we got connected, you know, we have obviously podcasts, we have a booking team, we do outreach all around the world and get people. In this case, we basically, I would say we met over our shared affinity for healthy food. We've bumped into each other twice locally. Once was at an actual meal prep place where we were both picking up our meals. The other was at a salad place called Mixed Greens that's, healthy. And I don't know, I guess maybe that's the universe just wanted us to hang out. So, okay, I'm going to go local here first. Are you from this area? We're in the St. George, Utah area. Are you from here or did you land here I did?
No, I grew up, I was born in LA, but I grew up in Rhode Island, Boston, New England area. And then
Yep.
Last place I lived before St. George was LA. I was in LA for 5 years.
Okay, perfect. So what brought you here other than the obvious scenery and, quality of life?
Man, I was actually going to hike Mount Zion with my daughter, and we were thinking about moving, and on the way hiking, we passed through St. George, and the energy was just so good, and my daughter said the same thing, and then next thing you know, we're looking at a place, we find a place, and we got the place. We moved in within 32 days, and we never even made it to Mount Zion. We literally turned back around, packed our stuff, and got back. So I came here to go to Mount Zion, still haven't climbed Mount Zion, but I ended up coming to St. George. And for me, I've been raising my daughter since she was 5 years old. And it's a wonderful place to raise a teenager.
Yeah, it is. We've got four that rate, 21 on the high end, down to 8 on the low end. And I probably shouldn't say this, but some nights I actually forget to lock my door, and I don't know that there's that many places in the country that are big enough to have a Costco, but also you can forget to lock your door and not have wake up having a panic attack. It is a cool place. Of course, I don't know why we're telling the world about it on this podcast. We should.
Hey, maybe they might move here. Yeah, that's a secret.
Anyways, man, it's so good to have you here. Okay, well, you already kind of started with your backstory. Maybe if you could just walk us into how you became, I doubt you sat down with a career counselor in high school and they're like, well, looking at your test scores, I think you'd be a great for being one of the world's foremost experts on mindfulness. I'm pretty sure that didn't happen. So how did it happen?
Nah, man, I'm a recovering serial entrepreneur. So I've been in business since, I was knocking on doors. That was my first real sales job from 16 to whatever, that's 21. And I was supposed to be 18 to work there. So I was kind of working ad hoc I was going to say their name. I'll leave it out. It's a Fortune 500 company. And the guy was really cool, got me in 18, knocking on doors. And that just made me tenacious. It built my skin to be a little bit thicker and to somewhat become impervious to rejection, and didn't know I needed those skill sets that early. And, I started to open businesses, start companies in a very young age. And I started a magazine company. So I was in publishing. Then I went into marketing, and I was working with cool companies like Foxwoods Casino, which at the time was the world's largest casino. They had merged with MGM, worked with Twin River, New England Patriots players. And then I had alcohol companies, I had lollipop confectionery companies, I mean, all these different companies, and gained a lot of experience. And in 2011, I had what I call my spiritual awakening, and realized it's not all about money. It's more about purpose and impact. And that led me down a different path. On that path, I had health complications with some stomach issues that doctors couldn't even diagnose me, never mind fix me. And that was really messing up my energy. I couldn't even think straight because of that brain gut connection. So I became very desperate, seeking out solutions to get back to me. And, I was doing colonoscopies, endoscopies. I was doing everything you can imagine for Western medicine. And it wasn't until I discovered this technique, this ancient breathing technique, deep diaphragmatic breathwork technique. And I did one session, and it completely eradicated my stomach condition. And that's when I created the company Breathwork Detox. And I've been doing that company for the last 5 years, and pretty solely focused on that, and also working with organizations and corporations to introduce corporate mindfulness as well.
Man, there's a lot of ways we can go there. Obviously, I want to hear more about the Breathwork Detox, and I'm sure the audience does too. But I do want, the thing that I've been wanting to say to you is I saw this social media post maybe a week ago, and I don't remember exactly what it said, but it was basically like making fun of mindfulness, because it was basically saying mindfulness was just called life before cell phones and social media. And now we have to coin this term for basically not being dopaminergically hijacked and super ADD all the time. So I'm curious your response to that, which I say, half in jest, but it was, there's probably a point to it.
Yeah. I mean, when you get to certain words, right, you have these semantics, right? Mindfulness, spirituality, entrepreneurship, it means different things to different people. And, mindfulness is, being aware and having consciousness about what you're doing and who you want to be. And, I keep it in real simple terms. And, mindfulness, and when I talk about corporate mindfulness, it's really bringing these, there's awareness in these certain modalities, like breathwork, into corporations, because it's like church and state, right? You can't bring spirituality into Fortune 500 companies. They'll kick you out the other door. So mindfulness is kind of like that Trojan horse, but it's not about any external deities. It's about you. It's about yourself. And, I love, the Matrix. And if you look above the Matrix, I believe it was in Latin, it's when he goes to meet the Oracle, it says, know thyself. And really, that's what mindfulness is about.
So I'll share with you, and I don't know if this is going to be like a fertile tangent to run down or just okay, that's interesting. But I'm in the middle of, I've been going through a lot of pretty tough, pretty stressful stuff lately. My wife and I have basically torn our business down to the studs, and we're kind of rebuilding it from the ground up. But at the same time, we also say we got to keep the plane in the air. We can't land it because we've got thousands of customers we have to continue to service while we're transforming the business from the ground up. So it's been a very stressful time. And I decided last weekend, or last week, I said, I think I'm going to do a fast. I just kind of feel like it's time to, there's a lot of different, angles on fasting, whether it's just a personal reset, a mindfulness exercise, courting favor from the universe, whatever. But I'm right now, I'm coming up on the end of day 3 of my plan is 6 days with only water, basically a 0-calorie fast. And I was literally just telling Jacqueline, my wife, like, I think what it's doing, my experience so far as I approach the halfway point is the hungerness, like the hunger, the sort of turbulent hunger has subsided. It's really settled into just this like dull, it's kind of like a dull roar of underlying hunger. And, people say it goes away. It's not going away. But what it has done is it's made me super present. Like I am in the present in the way that only discomfort can get you present. And I'm just so present. And I'm like going through and I'm like, I think this is the magic of this, is that it's really slowed down time. Where every set, because when you're hungry, it slows down time. And so anyway, I feel like I'm going through a really big mindfulness experiment right now. And that's the biggest thing I'll say, is that my perception of time is radically different right now than it seems to be most days, where I kind of get to the end of the day and it was like a blur and I'm like, man, where did all the time go? Right now, every second is I'm living it. So I'm curious your thoughts on that. And like I said, if that's a tangent worth running down or if we just move on.
First of all, I love that. And I do have a lot of experience with fasting. I've done it multiple times, usually 5, 10, and 21 day increments. So I did go 21 days without food. And I will say it actually does go away in a strange.
Okay.
So you're in like, the Navy SEALs, that first week they call Hell Week.
Yeah.
So it's like those first 3 days are the worst. So I tell people if they can get past those first 3 days, well, you can fast to up to 10, 12 to 21 days because you already went through all the hell you're going to go through. It's all the mental programming, all the subconscious relationship you have with food, all that stuff becomes in the front of the screen of your awareness instead of behind it. Yeah. So that's where the mindfulness comes in, where you're seeing how you react and just being completely present on, checking in on your hunger in ways that you haven't done before is getting present in your body. And when you're busy like you are and you're an entrepreneur, hustling and bustling, right? We tend to be in our minds a lot, and the mind always wants to look into the future, right? The soul wants to be, present, but the body does hold on to the past. And we can talk about that later when we talk about breath work. Yeah. So for some reason, after that third day, it gets easier and easier. And I remember I was at day 12 on my 21 day fast. And I said, oh my God, I'm not hungry. Do I even need food? Like to survive? I was really questioning if I really needed food and like thinking about, is it a conspiracy that we actually need food? That's how not hungry I was. And, there is some truth to that because there's so much crap in food. And I'm sure you can inadvertently agree with me because we eat at the same places, right? We care about what we put in our body. But all the other 1,000 places that are in St. George that we don't go to, there's probably like 3 or 4 we go to. It's probably same exact ones that have healthy food. But all the crap that they're putting in our food, unbeknownst to the people who are selling them, the additives, the chemicals, we're actually more addicted to the stuff they're putting in the food than the actual food. So when we get hungry, we're not actually hungry for food. We're addicted to the substances going in there. There's some science behind that. There's studies behind that. But I don't think we're supposed to be as hungry as we are. We're not meant to eat as much as we are. And me personally, just looking at my body and how I react to food, when I'm the strongest, most muscular tone, and I have the most energy is when I'm eating the least amount of food, which means that I'm not fasting. I'm eating. I'm probably eating 1 big meal a day or 2 medium to small meals a day rather than breakfast, lunch, dinner, smoothies in between, getting 5,000 calories, trying to bulk up. I'm at my best when I'm eating the least amount of food. And maybe there's some like primal, coding in there is when, you're more hungry, right? Then you have more energy. You want to go out there and hunt. But when you're, full and you just you're not really as aggressive in life and in business. So you want to stay a little bit hungry, and you always want to eat to 80%, never eat to 100%.
Yeah, that's I know that leaving the table always with a little bit more room left to fill is pretty common throughout various philosophies and cultures as kind of a, sage wisdom. Okay, so it sounds like you're in support that what I'm going through right now is probably contributing to mindfulness overall. That certainly is my experience. Before we dive deep specifically into breath detox, what are some of the other things you would say to kind of the average person out there? It's not so much, let's have an intense mindfulness experience, but more of let's add a little more mindfulness to daily living on a sustainable, ongoing basis. What are some of the things people can start to think about?
Yeah, there's a lot of things out there. And sometimes when you give people too many things to do, they don't do anything.
Right.
But the first exercise I always tell people to do, and because I did it and it changed a lot for me, and that is to get all of the problems that are floating in your head every single day, because we have 55,000 thoughts a day. 80% of those thoughts are negative in nature, but 98% of our daily thoughts are the same thoughts we had yesterday. So a lot of people are recycling these crappy thoughts every single day. And that is, by default, the brain will always go to the path of least resistance. And that's how those neural pathways are created. So they say that brain cells that fire together, wire together. So if you keep having these crappy thoughts, the brain's always going to go into that crappy state. So how do you change that? Well, I like to do a brain dump. And all the thoughts, the crappy thoughts, the things I need to do, the things that I'm worried about, I get them on a paper. So get everything on paper. I'm talking about the things you're even afraid to say out loud, the things you're afraid to admit, whatever's been lurking, behind that screen of awareness, put it on paper. Once you get everything on paper, you put a line down the paper on a new shade of paper, and you categorize it. And on one side is the things you can control. On the other side is the things you can't control. And by putting the things you can control and then seeing the things on the right that you can't control, one, you look at the things you can control and you say, okay, I'm going to start to do something, one step towards one of these things. And just that energy and that intention to get the things out of your mind and to begin to take action on those things. And then seeing the things that you have no control over, you have to let those things go. If you cannot control an outcome, like for me, there was one time where I didn't file my taxes, 2017 or whatever it was, or 2012. And I was like, I got to do it. And I was kind of procrastinating on it. And then I have this, fear in my head of my mother dying. Now, I don't want to admit that, but I put it on the piece of paper. So, on the right side, it's like, I don't know where this fear came from. And I had to put it on the side that I can't control. And once I was able to see visually the things that I cannot control, I stopped worrying about them. I stopped thinking about them. And the things that were, out of my head and on paper, I started to create action steps one by one. And that right there was the biggest release of anxiety and stress that I didn't even know I was holding on to. So that allowed me to be much more present because it got rid of all the mind frick that was going on in my head. Because why would I, it's so hard to give people mindfulness tips when there's so much garbage in the brain. The first step is dump the garbage out, right? What did Bruce Lee say? Empty the cup before you fill it up. Master
Right.
said, you got to unlearn before you can learn, right? And sometimes we need to let go before we can let in.
So I think in psychology, the concept you're talking about is known as self-efficacy. And this is like a mantra for me that my wife and I got from our therapist, is like, when it comes to time, energy, and money, which ultimately all originate from the mind and what we put our attention on, being extremely discerning in life about putting time, energy, and money on things that we can materially impact, and putting none of it towards things that we can't. Like that, what he's like, dude, you just get that one thing dialed in your life, and it's a rising tide that'll lift all the boats. So I love that you articulated that. I want to make sure I got these numbers right, because I'm totally going to make a post about this later. Because I say that, it's like, oh, he's going to make a post. I make posts because when I post something, and this goes with the Cialdini's commitment and consistency principle from influence, I find that when I post something I've learned, it helps me remember it. It like becomes a part of my life because it became a part of my message. So that's my context there. But I want to make sure I got this right. 55,000 thoughts a day, you said. 80% of them tend to be negative. Thank you. evolutionary biology and limbic brain system. And 98% of those thoughts are recycled from the day before.
Correct.
So it's ironic we call it mindfulness. It sounds like our minds are already overfilled. They have too much fullness. It's just with the wrong stuff.
Yeah, we're battling uphill over here. It's not a fair game. And you just look at the ratio to the news, right? Why does the news play 80% negative things and 20% positive? It's the same ratio. So a lot of it comes from programming, and maybe even deeper ancestral program this stuff comes from. Who knows? But this is the reality of it right now.
Wow, I'm taking this note. Oh my gosh, you just rocked my world to realize that the media, and I guarantee you there's intentionality behind this. You think about the media, 80% negative, 98% as essentially updating on the previous day's news, and the occasional news story gets inserted to start a new chain reaction for weeks. Notice how the media completely reflects the native organizational structure of our thought life.
It's scary, man, because, part of my, mindfulness awakening is I realized that, sometimes the news doesn't report the news, it creates the news, and they can control any narrative that is in whoever's agenda. It's a business. People need to understand that. And businesses have agendas and, profits to make. And that is what it is. It shouldn't be a shock to anybody. But it's really interesting when you make that correlation to this mass mind media programming that everyone watches. And even if they don't watch on the news, now social media is so integrated to what's on the news, they're going to get to us. They're valuable.
Well, and they if you think of the mind, like the media's goal is to decrease to the point of outright elimination any resistance that we might have to consuming an endless amount of their information, so that then they can wrap all the advertising and stuff around it. So they want to structure their product to perfectly fit the receptor that is our mind. And so 80% negativity, 98% recycling from the day before. It's like they've curated it to fit the size, the shape of our docking station in our brain.
Yeah, I don't know what comes first, the chicken or the egg here, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, and people always say, why can't the media be more, have more positive slant, or why can't they report on this, report on that? And okay, now I'm going to get autobiographical. I have in my business, Entre, I was telling you before, we've fused personal development and entrepreneurship. And the reason that we've done that is because I think there's this industry of teaching entrepreneurship, whether it's everything from multi-level marketing to business opportunities to franchises to internet marketing programs to actual, venture-backed innovation, Y Combinator, like the whole gamut of it. So much of it is oriented around how do we make this seem a little easier than it actually is, so that people will be drawn to it for the asymmetrical financial upside. And I'm always like, why can't we be more honest in the world? I'm trying to tell people, look, I actually agree that entrepreneurship, and my audience of this show is, very, I think, aligned with this. Entrepreneurship is actually the most legitimate option most people have in their life to make their financial goals a reality. And I think that employment typically isn't for most people. But let's still be honest with people about what it's going to take and the leveling up that's going to have to happen to be able to succeed at that game. And what I find is, like, because I've taken it on myself to say, I'm going to be really, really transparent with people, that although I do think entrepreneurship is the path for most people to get the goals they want, that I'm not going to sugarcoat how hard it is. And so I'm just going to include personal development and this leveling up ethos with the entrepreneurial training. It's so much harder to explain that to the world than it would be if I just sold getting rich quick.
Yeah.
Even though everybody knows that my message is more honest. And so the reason I say that is I think that as human beings, if we want to make progress as a species, we have to take an honest look at why it is that we naturally resist more honest messages in favor of ones that are more primally appealing, even if we know they're BS.
Yeah, that's why the saying goes, the truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off.
Oh, yes, yes. Okay, so let's bring mindfulness. Let's look at mindfulness through the lens of what we just said. Tell me, how hard is it? Like, I'm somebody that does a lot of work, a lot of spiritual work, a lot of meditative work, a lot of mindfulness work, I think you'd say. And I am completely enrolled in the benefits of that in my life. But I wonder, how much do you run into, call it like the woo-woo objection?
Yeah, I try to stay away from the woo-woo, even though, I can be known as a woo-woo master. I do go pretty deep and esoteric and metaphysical, but I'm also very aware of my audience. And you always have to meet people where they're at certain levels of consciousness. And consciousness has nothing to do with how smart you are or how much money that you make. So I have to be very kind of hyper vigilant on this, especially working with companies like Nike and NASA. When I go and work in companies like NASA, they're very left brain people, So my language changes, how I talk to them changes. I use more science-based facts than, how I talk to a marketing agency who's more right-brained and more creative and open. So, just being mindful of how we communicate, right? Some of these things, but, the basis of your business, of taking those two things and putting them together, it's essential. They're going to have to do that anyway. So whether they realize it now or not, it's like, boardwalk or park place. Which one do you want? Well, you need both, right?
Yeah.
If you really want to make it. So, I tell people, you are the business that you need to invest in. You're the relationship, right, that you need to grow, because you're going to be with yourself longer than anyone else. You're the only problem that you're ever going to have, but you're the only solution that you're ever going to need. And just know that if something needs to change in your life, that something is you.
Wow, I'm copying that down. You're the only problem you're ever going to have, and you're the only solution you're ever going to need. Is that what you said?
Correct. Yeah.
Oh, that's good stuff, man. Quite the soundbite. Okay, so then, yeah, I guess, how do you, when you go into these organizations, I'm assuming they want to say that, I mean, these are for-profit, large, corporate entities operating on shareholder theory and basically needing to justify outflows and correlate them to inflows. So, like, how do you go in and make the case quantitatively that this type of work is going to materially impact performance?
So typically with mindfulness, when a company want to bring in mindfulness, the first two things they think of is yoga and meditation, right? And they're great, right? I do yoga and I meditate. However, you need to continuously do these things in order to see the results that are compounded results, right? So you need to stay consistent. And it's really hard for companies to implement those types of programs that are consistent. So that's why they'll spend so much more money on a motivational speaker who comes in for 45 minutes and hoorahs them and gets them all built up and excited, and then they go back into the workplace, as opposed to like trying to calm them down and get them in mindfulness. So my approach is different. I found a modality that, unlike yoga and meditation, the results are immediate and undeniable from just one session. And that's the power of breathwork. And them being able to see the results immediately and the profound reactions that it has, and the things that it does, immense clarity, energetic clearing. People just feeling heavy, now they're feeling light, they're feeling buoyant. They got people that never smiled. They'll be like, that guy hasn't smiled in 2 years, and he's over here just like floating out of the place. So they see these things and they're like, wow, this stuff works. And that's why NASA put on record, I believe in Bloomberg and Yahoo, they said that no event they did previously elicited such a positive response, because it works, right? It's tangible, and there's no barriers to entry. If you look at yoga, 52% of the world's population can't even bend down and touch their toes. And, the body shaming, and like, people don't want to throw on a leotard and start bending over in front of people. So, and even yoga without the breath is just stretching, So, there's barriers to entry. And I think there's even more barriers to entry to things like meditation, because I believe meditation is more of an advanced practice. Because if you try to get somebody who's stressed out, which according to Harvard, 60 to 90% of all doctors' visits are stress related. So the world is stressed out. It's a fact. So if you try to get someone who's already stressed out to sit down, sit still, and don't think a thought for the next 20 minutes, they're going to get more stressed out. Remember those 55,000 thoughts, 80% of that? I don't know, do the math. So with breath work, we're not trying to take the chaotic ocean, right, of all this mess in our brain and quiet it down to a still pond, right? We're not levitating Buddhist monks over here. We're living in the city trying to make $1 and keep our cell phone on.
Right.
Breath work is the opposite. We have these chaotic thoughts, but we're giving the brain something active to do. We're using the breath and we're forcibly pushing all of these crazy thoughts out. And the brain will actually go into something called transient hyperfrontality. So by 8 to 12 minute mark, the prefrontal cortex of the brain begins to quiet down. Now that's important, because that's the part of the brain that says, I'm me, you're you, this is good, this is bad. It's an executive decision maker. And when you can consciously, in a week, quiet that part of the brain down, all of a sudden, I say you enter this like quantum field, but all the answers to your questions are there. And I never did something that induced more clarity and creativity than breath work. And then people say, how does it give it so much, creativity and clarity? Well, first of all, breath work doesn't induce the clarity and creativity. What it does is it removes all the junk that's been getting in the way. And that's a lot of the conscious mind, right? So I became a certified hypnotherapist from the oldest and largest hypnotherapy school. And to get someone into hypnosis, you have to distract and bypass the conscious mind. The conscious mind is like the goalie, right? It's the fullback. It's not letting anything through. So this breath work, it calms the conscious mind, it gets it out of the way, and then all of a sudden you have this immense clarity. So those results, right? And then we are working on ways to quantifiably show that by working with HRV. So there's actually an app where you don't need a wearable device, a watch or a ring, which can be expensive. And now just through an app, I can have a company put their finger on for 60 seconds, read their HRV, and then I can look at a dashboard, look at the marketing department, the sales department, the executive team, and say, wow, the marketing department is low on energy, so they probably have low creativity. I don't think you want your marketing department to be low on creativity. Let's do a creative inducing breathwork event. Executive team, they're on the verge of burnout over here. I can see on this dashboard, let's do a 3-day retreat in Hawaii, right? So these are ways we can show them quantifiably using data and metrics with breathwork. So we're working on some cool things, but even without the bells and the whistles, the results is what's making this thing blow up.
HRV is heart rate variability.
Yeah.
Right? It's like how, so it's not measuring your heart rate. It's measuring, it's measuring the volatility of your heart rate in a sense. Okay, cool. So do you have to, you're saying this can be done virtually? You don't have to like physically be in a room to do it?
Correct. So I've done live events, all over the world. And then during COVID, we went virtual. Reluctantly, I went virtual. I'm like, they can't have the same experience. And what I noticed was actually the opposite. People were having more of an experience because, so not everybody wants to be in a room full of other people, introverts, whatever. So by doing this virtual, they're in their own space. They get their headphones on. They get their, their Just Breathe eye mask, and they're in their own time capsule. And they go through this virtual experience and have profound results. And we do the virtual events every 2 weeks. So every 2 weeks I'll do it. And, people will come on, log on from all over the world and go through this experience. And, a lot of people come to taste the Kool-Aid because they read the testimonials and, people, there's one on there I have with Dr. Michael Bruce, and, he's been on Dr. Oz 39 times, Oprah, and I actually did an event with him, and he had a profound breakthrough. He was like begging to give me a testimonial. And actually at that same event was Mark Victor Hansen, who I think he holds the Guinness Book of most books sold, 500 million from Chicken Soup of the Soul. And he came up to me afterwards. He goes, I need your email. I was like, okay, yeah, cool. Here, Mark Victor Hansen, And he's like, I can't talk to you now because I'm still processing of what the heck just happened, but I would reach out. And he reached out about maybe like 2 weeks later, and he wrote me this awesome email saying that, I tried so many different things. And this is one of the godfathers of personal development, right?
Right.
And I've been trying to forgive this person for over 30 years. In one session of Breathwork Detox allowed me to do that. I cannot thank you enough. Anyone who's thinking about trying this needs to try this. So it's great when I get these testimonials, but when I get them from people who's been in the game, who's tried so many things, who've created their own things, that's when I was like, I'm on the right path. I'm onto something here.
And so did you say that this, call it fork in the road of your life, had something to do with something that happened in 2011, what you call the spiritual awakening? Real quick, I want to let you know about my text message community. So I use text messages to provide unique value to my podcast listeners. These texts can just be random thoughts. It can be letting you be the first to know about an event I'm planning or some free training that I'm planning to host for the community. Just shoot me a text to get subscribed to the list. The number is 702-996-3926. Again, that number is 702-996-3926. Now let's get back to the podcast.
The spiritual awakening, all that did, not to trivialize it, it made me realize that the world that I was living in isn't the world that I thought it was. And I started to think outside the box, as they say, way outside the box, borderline tinfoil hat wearing type person. But expanded my mind, expanded my consciousness. What really got me into the breathwork, because, I already, in 2012, I knew I wanted to help people. I was still an entrepreneur, so I didn't know how to connect the two, right? Which is pretty much what your whole company does, how to connect those two. So, first thing I did was I became certified personal trainer from ISA, so International Sports Science Fitness Professional. And then I became a certified life coach. Then I got into hypnotherapy certification, NLP. And then I started to become a little bit more spiritual and got Reiki master. But what really got me into the breathwork was my pain, that stomach condition where doctors, I was spending tens and thousands of dollars in co-payments, the best doctors from LA to New York. And for 5 years I suffered. And when I did this one technique and it healed me, I couldn't wrap my brain. Like I'm a Capricorn, right? So I'm also very analytical and very logical. I got to see it to believe it. It's really hard to get things past me. So I couldn't wrap my brain around how this stupid little breathing technique just solved the problem and healed something that the best doctors from LA to New York couldn't even fix. So once I figured that out, I was like, man, this is it, because nobody knows about this. I was already in it for a decade. And there was yogis who, been teaching for 20, 30 years, and they weren't familiar with this technique. And I was like, the world, they don't know about this. And once I figured out they don't know about this, then my entrepreneur brain kicked in, and I was like, all right, if this helped me when I've done everything from go to the jungles of Peru and drink ayahuasca 14 times. And, if you look at my back, I take off my shirt, I have 36 little scars down my back from combo, this frog venom that shamans put in. Like, dude, I tried everything, like very out of desperation. And then this one technique did it. I was like, okay, we are double clicking, double downing on this, and we're going to bring this to the world. And that's been the mission. And without,
giving away your sources, what more can you tell us about how you got exposed to this technique in its, in its hidden state, so to speak?
Yeah. So, I actually was at a session with someone called CNT. It's this Taoist tummy massager. So she only works with the tummy. And she told me, she's like, wow, Kurtis, your wind gate is blocked. So in Chinese medicine, your wind gate is the main energy center behind your belly button, where all new energy comes in and where all old energy comes out. It's like your power center. And she goes, yours is blocked. And she's like, there's this very specific breathing technique. There's a few people in LA where I was living. They specialize in this. I suggest you go see one of them. So I went to one session, and I was sitting there, and there was this she was like 90 pounds, this tiny little girl. And then there was an NFL player, played for like the Rams, and they were right beside me, sandwiched. And then we start the breathing technique, and then I don't know, like 10 minutes in, this girl starts crying. So I'm doing the breathing technique, and I'm looking over. I'm like, I wonder what messed up shit happened to her. Like, she might have broke up with her boyfriend. I don't know. And then I'm breathing, and all of a sudden, this 6'5" masculine, jacked NFL player. He starts crying like a toddler. And I'm in between these two people. And then they're crying. And I'm like, oh my God, why is everybody? And before I could even have that thought, I was like, why is everybody? And Jeff, I let out the most biggest, ugliest cry you could see. And that was where the healing takes place, because what people need to understand about crying is a huge energetic release. It's a huge emotional release. And when I was talking earlier about the body holds on to the past, the body keeps score. The body is a living library. And when we're younger, we have to redefine our definition of trauma, right? Trauma now versus then, we could have got pushed off the swing, not picked for dodgeball. That's traumatic for a child. And life happens and all these things compound over years, and it stores in our body because we don't have that emotional intelligence as children to process it. So we're carrying around all this excess baggage, right? And sometimes it's not the weight of the baggage, it's how you carry it. And we just learn to carry it well, especially single mothers, entrepreneurs who got to keep, provide for their families. So I was carrying all this trauma from childhood, and all those certifications and all those things I didn't allow or teach me how to release it and let go. And this technique was the only thing that gets in there and does that. And that's why I had my big ugly cry, and that completely changed the energetic template of my entire body, where I got smarter. I could think better. I got more productive. I felt better. And I was like, wow, I actually feel like me again. And it was years before I felt like that. So yeah, man, I got put on from a Taoist tummy massager, if that answers your question.
TTM. So is that when you talk about your spiritual awakening, are you talking about something that's anchored in that experience?
No, my spiritual awakening.
That preceded it.
Yeah, that preceded it. That was maybe 5 years after.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I swear there's something to this, a little bit of context. This podcast began as basically a research project to say, because, my whole business, Entre, and everything I do now is essentially around trying to decipher and decode success, which is success is different things to different people, but to really, unlock your potential. It's the name of the show, right? I'm trying to decode it so more people can access it. And so I'm like, well, I should just talk to as many outlier successful people as I can and try to find the patterns. And so I think this is a pattern that I've identified. And it's basically, you called it a spiritual awakening. You also referenced this idea that it's about more than money, that when you align something, I think you actually used the term purpose, which we use that term a lot. We call it the fourth P: physical, personal, professional, and then all for a purpose called purpose, the fourth P. And that once you kind of cross that threshold of saying, all right, I'm going to elevate beyond just living for myself, let's call it, and try to align my survival self and my social self and those parts of me that want to be both alive and desirable to others, but I'm going to align them towards service and impact, something bigger than me, right? That after that happens, invariably we start bumping into things that and I think it's our reticular activating system now is looking for these things. I don't think that it's new things come into our world. I just think we see different things in our world, but we start coming up across things that we go, oh, this could really help a lot of other people.
Yeah.
It sounds like this is one more support for that archetypal human story.
Yeah, I love that. And that was what it was for me, is that I kind of unconsciously shifted into that state. Now I feel like I was born an entrepreneur. I just felt like it has been in me since a very young age. And then, yeah, Jeff, I got to that point where I was like, I started looking for things to change myself, but the things that actually worked, I'm like, I have to share this with the world. What actually worked? What is really moving the needle out there? And only focusing on things that move the needle, because there's so many memberships out there, there's so many programs, there's so many supplements. Everyone's saying their program or their product's gonna change everything, but it's like, if you have a program or a product that truly moves the needle, that people can see those quantifiable results and they can literally feel it, that's what people are looking for now, because there's just an overwhelm of things out there, and we only have 24 hours in a day. So there's only so many things that we can allocate our energy and our time to. So that's what I wanted to focus on. There's so many things I could be doing right now, but I have to focus on the things that are going to help other people. And when I aligned with that, it's like so much worry and stress of who am I? Why am I here? All that just dissipated, and I was able to just go 100 miles per hour in the direction that I know I need to go.
So I feel like we're touching upon this theory I think it's pretty well supported out there around drives. You mentioned your entrepreneurial drive. And I would love for the audience to take a moment and really think about, what are your drives? Like, some of us we have different drives, right? Some of us have an entrepreneurial drive. Some of us have like an athletic drive. We like to go out and move our bodies. Some of us might have more of a call it an introverted drive to read books or something. You have an entrepreneurship drive. I think most men have a strong sex drive. Like, there's these drives in our life, right? And then I think that what we do with our drives has so much to do with what our life becomes over time. And that if we have, drives to me are a signal from whatever created us. Hey, this is something you're supposed to do something with. Like, I don't think we're given drives that are aimless and directionless, right? They're meant to be oriented towards something. And I think the first instinct of humans is to orient a drive towards the pleasurable gratification of that drive.
Yeah.
And so with entrepreneurship, it's like, oh, I'm driven to go create things and solve problems. So I'm going to orient it towards the immediate gratification of that, or the most sort of superficial gratification of that drive is like, I'm going to figure out how to make a lot of money with it. The sex drive is one that's pretty obvious to figure out how we can orient it toward, gratification. But what I have found is that the more you orient your drives toward purpose versus pleasure, the more they ultimately produce pleasure over pain.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah. For me, those two ingredients were drive and direction. So some people have drive without direction, which is dangerous. And that's what actually leads them on the path of self-destruction, right? Yeah. Because that's why a lot of drug addicts actually have the most drive out of a lot of people. Yeah. And when they get off drugs, they're super successful. So that drive without direction, it's dangerous because you can go nowhere fast, right? And it's like, everything can be right, but if you don't have that rudder on your boat, you can have the best captain, best boat, best ship, but if you're going in that ocean and that rotor is that is broken, you're going to be going to left, to right, you can be going in circles. So direction is more important than speed. And I love when they ask Tony Robbins, like, hey, where do you get all your motivation from? He says, I don't need motivation. My vision is so clear that it pulls me towards my goals. So I believe the two go together, because you can have direction with no drive and nothing's going to happen. You need the direction and the drive. Those two go together. So when you can align with that vision, align with that clarity, and you have that drive, I feel like I was born with the drive. I can't speak for other people, but at times the drive gets low. And what I noticed was the drive gets low when the direction isn't clear, right? When it's foggy, you start to slow down the boat and be like, wait a second. You start to just kind of just idle through life. So aligning people with that, the drive and the direction, and focusing on the direction, the drive just kicks into another gear.
Do you have, I feel like I have about time for one more question before I ask you how the world can come find you and, do your workshops and such. But my final question I want to ask you is, do you have any tips on helping people achieve and maintain that clarity of vision throughout the fogginess of life and the fact that the fog's always trying to creep in? Yeah.
And man, I hate to be the shameless plugger, but I'm just being honest, biased, but honest. A breathwork detox session. What it does for your mind and the clarity, it gets rid of all the junk that you don't need to focus on, everything that doesn't belong there. So it helps release, that's why we call it detox, because it helps release anything and everything that doesn't serve your highest and greatest good. So you can at least see what's clear, right? You don't have to look at the entire staircase. That's overwhelming, but that next step, and it reveals that. And it it's mystical. There's a lot of things that happen in the body with, small amounts of microdosing of DMT naturally. That's the vision keeper. It's actually the compound responsible when we go to bed at night and we dream and we vision is dimethyltryptamine. And if you look at DMT, it's actually called the spirit molecule. And that is a whole documentary on Netflix. And there's actually more dimethyltryptamine produced in the lungs than there is in the pineal gland. So when you use this technique, it's like a cheat code. Like, dude, we played video games, right? You hit up, down, left, right, A, B, A, B. Mario grows, 6 feet tall and pulls out 2 bazookas, and they have cheat codes. Well, guess what? Humans programmed those computers in those games with cheat codes. Well, I'd like to think that my creator, who I can make a little cut on my arm and it heals itself, is magical to me. Like, if we overlook those things. Well, our creator created us with a cheat code. And the cheat code is when you do this very specific breathing technique for a very specific amount of time in this exact way, you unlock all these amazing things: transient hypofrontality, dimethyltryptamine, and the visions that you have, the clarity that you have. I just haven't found something that comes close. So it's really the secret sauce.
Okay, so perfect tee up then. I'll just go ahead and share. Right now, we're recording this. It's September 11th. Coincidentally, interesting. I don't think I actually realized that until I just said it, by the way.
Yeah, me too.
Wow. So, okay. So this episode will probably be released. I think we're running 3 or 4 weeks, maybe. Let's assume by mid-October. How often do you do these breath detox? You said we can do them virtually. Come to your website? How do we get access to it?
Yeah, I actually created a code for you guys. So there's a code, podcast 50, and they'll get 50% off their first virtual event. And I do them every 2 weeks. And I actually coincidentally do them on every new moon and every full moon. So we go with the astrology to keep it consistent. Every 2 weeks, I'll go on and do virtual events. So they can go to breathworkdetox.com, go right to breathworkdetox.com, go to the virtual events and put in the code podcast 50. Boom, they get 50% off and they can come taste the Kool-Aid.
Okay, so I'm actually at breathworkdetox.com right now. You said go to
virtual events, should be top left-hand corner in the program.
Virtual events. Okay, beautiful. So here's what I'm going to suggest. I see your video there. It looks like you recorded, what's that, Snow Canyon? Somewhere around there.
Yeah, it was actually. That's right where I live, over there.
Yeah, we went to see a show at 2:00 last night. So,
nice.
Sorry, I warned you guys we'd get into some local geeking out. So there it was. But here's what I'm going to suggest. I don't know exactly the date when this episode will be released, but from whatever date people are hearing this, I'm going to do this too. Let's all go to breathworkdetox.com and let's use podcast 50 and let's see if we can flood Kurtis's next session subsequent to the release of this episode with as many Unlock Your Potential viewers and listeners as possible. And let's all go do a Breathwork Detox session together after this episode comes out. I think that'd be a lot of fun. And we'll put all the info in the show notes, but podcast 50, breathworkdetox.com.
That's awesome, man. I appreciate that. They're gonna love it. They'll thank you later.
I'm taking you at your word. I suspect this can be pretty cool. I did read quite a few testimonials on your website, so I have pretty good confidence. Plus, you're local. I know where to find you. So yeah. But okay. So beyond that, where else can the audience come to get more of you if they want to learn more about this or anything else that you're doing in the world? Yeah,
I mean, my Instagram, Man from the Stars. So go on Instagram, type in Man from the Stars, and I'm pretty good, man. I like all comments. I try to get back to people within 48 hours. So I'm pretty engaging with my audience. And if you have a question, you can reach out to me.
Awesome. I've seen you. I didn't know you were Man from the Stars, but I've seen Man from the Stars, both posts and on my posts. So cool. Very cool. Very cool. All right, Kurtis, this has been a blast, man. Grateful to know you. Grateful to have you on the show.
Thank you, man. Yeah, I had fun.
All right. And so to all you viewers and listeners, I'm going to see many of you on Kurtis's Breathwork Detox in the next 1 to 2 months, whenever this episode comes out. And of course, you know what I'm going to say, that you, even when Kurtis is our guest, you are truly the best part of this show. You're why we do it every single time. I'm so glad we got to spend this time together, and I can't wait till next time. See ya. If you loved that episode, then you're definitely going to love this one. Check it out.
Fundamentally, there are only two important functions in a company. Somebody's got to make it and somebody's got to sell it. And that's Apple. Steve Wozniak makes it, Steve Jobs sells it. And everything else you can hire or you could postpone. If you cannot make it as an engineer, you better be good in sales.